Future podcast is brought to you by Aberhart Ag Solutions. Join us as we talk to top entrepreneurs in the agricultural space about their methods of obtaining success in their endeavors. And now, your host, Terry Aberhart.
So yeah, we're sitting here at the Ag Smart conference with Evan Evan Schout from Maverick Ag. Just started a kind of a new venture there. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you got going on with Maverick Ag.
You bet. So we're a startup company, started about March 1st. So business risk management and insurance consulting. So going over the farm income programs, the private insurance, and just helping producers essentially figure out what their farm can take in terms of stress and in terms of risk management. We'd seen the need for a couple of years. I worked with MNP for quite a few years, so I got to know the farm income programs really well. And honestly, we just wanted to give producers another outlet, another area, another venue to try and bulletproof their farms, essentially.
Yeah, so I think in general, I mean, if you're not an accountant and you're not a financial guru, you maybe don't always get super excited when you talk about business risk management and insurance and those couple things. But you had a discussion or a talk this morning in one of the breakout sessions. And I sat in and it was really interesting, and I think the way you're looking to pull some of the data together to make decisions is really quite interesting. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
So on the data analytics side, I do some CFO work and some benchmarking data analytics for about 100,000 acres in Saskatchewan. Mm-hmm. And what we try to focus on more is tying it all together. So most guys, when they hear big data, they hear data analytics, always accustom it to machinery or big capital expenditures. We wanted more to get the point across that raw data is available to everybody. If you file a tax return, if you have accrual financial statements, you have raw data. So most guys don't look at that side as actual data analytics, and it's probably the most important part. So when we tied into insurance, and you're right, insurance is not a sexy word. Most guys don't like talking insurance, and they don't like talking premiums and everything else. However, using the data analytics from your financial statements, if you can find a way to take the volatility out of farming, you get a way of taking the risk out of farming. And with mental health in agriculture and everything that we deal with, most farmers today deal with more risk and more dollars than anybody I know. If we can literally get rid of the bottom end risk, it just makes you sleep better at night. Mm-hmm. And honestly, again, nobody likes talking insurance, but in terms of importance on the farm, we can talk yield, we can talk gross revenues, we can talk anything you want, cost of production. However, if we are talking insurance, all we're talking about is figuring out what line of self-insurance you can actually afford, and not just on the income statement, but on the balance sheet. So what's the opportunity cost of lost working capital? Yes, maybe on the income statement you can take a hit, but if that hit cuts into working capital and your neighbors take a hit and you have an opportunity to expand, did you just lose money where you could have actually expanded going forward? The other risk that we have is when most farmers end up having a bad year, it sits in their head. The next 2-3 years, they cut back. They pull back on inputs. Hopefully they pull back on fixed costs, but not usually. So by pulling back on inputs, that 1 year literally just hurt the next 3. So the whole guiding principle behind Maverick was to literally figure out what stress and what the stress test for most farms is, figure out that bottom line that's not going to affect your future decision making.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that really stuck out in your conversation was, do you know how much you can afford to lose? Do you know what that number is in your farm? And I'm sure most farms don't have any idea. And the other thing that I think a lot about is on the risk side, I mean, there's lots of different programs out there between crop insurance and agri-stability and GARS and the private things out in the market, just as well as how you're managing your farm. But what kind of blow my mind a bit is that, I mean, you're making these decisions on the farm depending on your size of the farm. Some of these decisions can be $100,000 or $200,000 decision on a insurance program that you may buy. It's big dollars, and as well, that's just the cost of the premium or the program, not even considering the top end risks that you're managing. And there's very little, what I see, analysis or review or consulting that growers will do before they make that decision. And to me, that just seems crazy.
And that's the problem, is everybody likes the whole gut check, right? You guys are farmers. I'm sure you built your farm up over the last 10, 20 years. You guys are successful. Don't get me wrong. Farmers know their business very well. It's more on the insurance side of just figuring out what that risk is. You're right, on cost of production, I talk to a lot of farms. A lot of farmers believe they know what their cost of production is. When I get in there and analyze, a lot of times it's not correct. Most guys, amortization, depreciation, not considered a factor because it's not a cash expense until you trade that piece of machinery. So it's making sure you got accurate data, and that's part of the presentation this morning, was that big data is great, raw information is great. If we're talking data analytics, we need accuracy, and we need to know what it actually means. So it's more or less putting that in place, right?
For sure. And I mean, you farmed for a few years, and you have all this experience from Myers, Norris and Penny. I find that, you know, those people that have that financial acumen and experience, but also did it themselves, have a very, very different viewpoint. And so I'm curious, what do you see as through your years working with M&P and farmers, what do you see right now as some of the biggest risks or challenges that we're facing in the industry?
I'd like to say my past farm knowledge has given me a lot, but honestly, the stuff I know now, if I'd have known 10 years ago, would have been really beneficial.
You might still be farming, maybe?
Exactly. So from my perspective, and I mean, this is highly accounting biased because that's where I've spent the last decade, the biggest risk in farming right now is cash, cost, and coverage. So on the cash flow side, working capital on farms liquidity is probably the worst it's been ever. So we've come through 10 years where a lot of farms expanded and a lot of farms have done very well, yet cash flow is actually worse when you compare it to expenditures. On the cost of production side, we're $100 higher than we were 10 years ago. Now, you would know as well as I do, price of wheat, price of canola hasn't changed that much for the last 10 years. So we literally need to make up in yield $100 an acre. So the risk there is exponentially through the roof. And then the reason I bring in coverage again is that most guys, you're right, they don't know their numbers, they don't know the stress test on their farm, and self-insurance is a real thing. I've talked to a lot of producers in the province that believe that 1 out of 10 years, they'll have a disaster. If they save their premium on insurance those other 9 years, they're good. And you know what? The numbers are probably right, they're probably not wrong. The issue is that A, did they save that money that they would have wasted on premium, or did they spend it on capital expenditures? And B, as long as it's not year 10 and 11. Because if it's year 10 and 11, there's not a lot of farms where I've seen a balance sheet that can take 2 years of hit, especially with the dollar figures we're dealing with now.
Mm-hmm. So what do you see as some of the biggest opportunities now moving forward to work with farms, and what farmers need to be thinking about?
I think part of the biggest opportunity is that we've got a lot of very skilled professionals out there, and farms need to start encompassing. We've always dealt with what we call rugged individualism. Farmers like to be on their own. They like to know that they accomplish things, and if they have a bad year, they like to keep it to themselves. Mm-hmm. And don't get me wrong, I was one of them. The biggest thing I've seen from being an advisor for the last decade is that you need help. You need other people, whether it's your bankers, your lawyers, your accountants, other farmers. You need an advisory board, and you need someone to essentially pass questions and answers off of. Because what you don't know, you don't know. So essentially, if somebody else has that knowledge, it's great to essentially encompass it. The other thing I would say is guys just need to embrace the change. We're in a very highly revolutionary industry. The last 4 months have been whirlwind for me since we started up. What I thought I'd be doing 3 months ago, I'm not. And honestly, it's changing so fast that guys just need to be able to keep up with the speed of it. And whether that's embracing technology or data or however you want to do it, guys just have to be ready to react.
For sure. I mean, and that's part of our mindset, and the purpose of this podcast too is just, you know, sharing knowledge and looking forward to the future. And change is rapid and abundant, and it's not going to slow down anytime soon. And I think it's very hard for any of us to predict the future. But I really like the analogy that you also used in the presentation about the Netflix versus Blockbuster. And, you know, that was only 2003, 2004, I think, where you showed on your graph there that they're kind of in the same place. And of course, Blockbuster isn't even in business, and Netflix become a worldwide, you know, monster kind of thing. So I think it's really important to have that mindset that things are going to change and be open, and the opportunity is those that can see the change. And I think this is a little bit where you guys are coming from, starting this new initiative. I think you can see, you feel like you can see where the market is going. You don't know exactly where that is, but there's an opportunity there, right?
Yeah, and we'd like to think we know where the opportunity is, but you're right, we don't. And honestly, the biggest thing for us is that every farm I meet is different. Some farms do very, very well. Some farms with certain programs are very well. On the risk management side especially, guys just have to realize that they can stack programs. Like one is not better than the other. Maybe two work, maybe one works. It's literally the guys don't know the programs enough to do that. And on the farming side, they just don't know what they don't know, really.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that really struck me is the historical graph that you showed of gross revenue in Canada and profitability, right? And we're producing more and more gross revenue, but the margins and the profitability is going down. We're carrying more debt. Working capital is more of an issue. So, I mean, I've always believed that it doesn't matter what industry you're in, and whether it's farming or something else, you have to be in the top percentile in order to be sustainable and to continue to move forward. And there's no doubt there's been challenges in agriculture all through history. There's still always going to be farmers. It's just you're going to have to be really good at what you do in order to be sustainable and have something that you can pass on to the next generation. And I think that's what we're all looking for.
Yeah, and I think the goal is not, as I said before, bulletproofing is one goal we have. If we can make farms so the downside risk isn't there, great. Now, you know as well as I do, that might be a bit of a theory at this point, but that's the goal. So on the graph with the volatility and the net income, essentially the net income goes like this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the real risk with farming, is that we need to find a way to curb the downside risk and leave the upside. So it's no different than marketing. You want to sell your grain at the highest, but you want to make sure that you sell your grain at the break even, right? All we're trying to do with Maverick is figure out a way to help producers, figure out what that bottom line is, and make sure that we stay above it.
So what are you most excited about for the next 3 to 5 years?
I think, obviously I'm a little biased on the insurance and accounting side, but I think I'm most excited for the risk management part. Is, yes, private insurance is new, 5 or 6 years out there, but it's given a little bit of competitive nature. Even SAS Crop Insurance has come out with the CAP program as a means and an alternative. So competition is great. Competition is very good for our industry because it gives producers another leg up. So having more companies able to do this is only good for the producers. So if we can continue this rise and continue to get competitive and continue all these programs, I think it just leads to a good upside for a lot of producers that are willing to let us help, right?
Yeah, and I think one thing I've kind of learned through some of the different travels over to Argentina, Brazil, and even Ukraine and Russia and stuff. I mean, you go to some of these places and I mean, the land is super productive and you the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence, right? And maybe there's not a strong feeling of political stability and stuff right now in Canada with everything that's going on, but what I quickly realized, I mean, you start kind of doing the napkin math on some of the production there, and you know, and at the end of the day, it's like, well, the numbers aren't really that much different, and they really, most of those places have almost nothing for risk management programs, and I mean, I don't believe the farm should, you know, be relying on those things, but I just realized, hey, I mean, I don't think they have anything more there in some of those places than we have here, and they don't have the stability and they don't have some of these programs. And you're right. I think what we're seeing now is just the beginning of the evolution. There's private companies coming into this space, competition. It just drives everything. You look at, you know, seeding technology in Western Canada. Everybody's competing against each other and driven a huge amount of innovation. So I'm excited to see where things are going to go.
Yeah. And as well, I mean, we're here at AgSmart. We spent the last 2 days looking at the tech boom in agriculture. It's one of the biggest industries in Silicon Valley. How can you not be excited? I mean, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we were using light bars, and yesterday I saw Dot spray fields. So I think the upside for agriculture can only go up, so it's good.
Yeah, and I really liked your talk about the data and making intelligence decisions, because I think the big data thing has just been overhyped. And it's kind of a theme that I've been starting to talk about in some of the presentations that I've made is, you know, big data is just, it's nothing. It's just a bunch of garbage. But what we're looking for is an intelligent data, is taking the pieces out of that and putting it into some kind of a form or report where you can start making intelligent decisions. And that's really, really powerful.
Yeah, like we spent 5-10 years talking about big data, and that's great, but in my feeling it's overdone now.
Mm-hmm.
We've got the data, we know we have it. So big data is here and gone. You're right about the intelligent data or data analytics, however we want to put it. Let's start pulling that data, making sure it's accurate, and using it to make decisions. Because honestly, the gut feeling, those days are gone. Let's start using what we know, or historically what we've found to be right, to make future decisions.
For sure, and it just makes me think of something that my dad says now is, when he was farming, basically it was whoever if you could outwork the neighbor, that's whoever could sit on the plow the longest or get the most work done would get ahead. And now he says, it's whoever is the smartest who's going to survive and thrive and move forward. And I kind of think about it. You do want to have really good data, and that's, I think, a challenge that we struggle with when it comes to yield data and those kind of things. But I also think when you get a big enough database, it's just like your cell phone. So the GPS on your cell phone individually is actually not very accurate at all. But when you put 5,000 cell phones in a city and aggregated data, they can create really, really accurate traffic maps, right? Because they have so much data and it kind of filters out the error. So there's going to be, I think, a combination of just having really good, accurate data to make decisions. But there's also going to be cases where they have so much data that the average of it is actually really accurate.
Yeah, and honestly, the last 10 years in public practice accounting, that was the big thing, is it's all aggregated data. So let's take a sample of the top 100 farms and see exactly where the numbers fall out, and then go around and show everybody, because it's not, obviously you're not showing them anybody's data, you're showing them aggregate. You're saying, here's what you're shooting for. Not because we're telling you this, not because the banks are telling you this, but because your neighbors, your competitors are actually achieving this. So we know it's possible. And that's all I find with data is, we need data because honestly it shows farmers what is possible. Because at most of these presentations, what I find is a lot of guys will walk out and they'll say, you know what, that's not for my farm. Or there's too much capital expenditure. Or whatever the excuse might be. I think now data is starting to come so forefront and it's so easily accessible now. The guys are actually realizing that, hey, we can actually use this to make up more profit.
For sure. So, I'm not really a finance guy or a numbers guy initially. I got into farming and my passion was driven around agronomy and growing a great crop. That's what the guys like to brag about at the coffee shop and those kind of things, right? But you quickly realize, I guess, through some of the struggles and the poor times that we had on the farm, that the importance of understanding those numbers, working with the right people, and along with that, it really takes a lot of stress. You talk about the mental health side of things, the decision making, working with family, all these things. Well, probably the biggest change for us in working with this and learning more and working with the right experts, people like yourself, it takes so much of the emotion. It's not gut check decisions. You're making decisions based off the numbers, those kind of things, and it really kind of blows my mind how, with the amount of the dollars and the numbers and the risk involved, how more farms aren't way farther down the road in adopting and working with these kind of people and experts to make those decisions.
But I think the big thing is what the professionals were always saw is just do the work. Or we go to the bank, we ask for money. Mm-hmm. A lot of farms haven't made that jump to, we go to the bank, what can you do for us? So it's more of a partnership, right? And I think the mindset of agriculture has to get there sooner or later. I'm not saying it hasn't shifted, because trust me, the last 10 years it has moved, but we're still not there. You want a team in place, and that team doesn't have to be an expensive board or an advisory group. It has to be your banker, your accountant, your lawyer. When you have a yearly meeting, if you're going to meet these guys anyway, how about you put them all in the same room? Because honestly, having the opinion of 3 professionals on a decision is a lot more beneficial than having this guy tell me this guy tell me this, and this guy tell me this. So I think it becomes very crucial, and honestly, on all the boards that I've sat on for farms, it literally has been 3 professionals or 4 professionals or however many you want, and a couple farmers. They don't have to be neighbors, because you don't want the guy you play hockey with, because honestly, he's a buddy. He's never going to tell you the bad stuff about your farm. You want another farm that's going to challenge you. They're going to say, well, we do it this way, and our numbers are better than yours. Maybe you want to adjust. And I think the biggest problem is farmers don't want to hear that, but it also inflicts change. So if you're willing to hear the bad, the negative side of it, I think your business can really prosper.
Yeah, I think that's great kind of advice and mindset. It just makes me think of one of the first times we actually did that. I think a lot of times, like you say, we have this rugged individualism idea, And sometimes when things are tough, you don't really want to share. And I remember it wasn't really that long ago, it might have been 2012 or 2013, we had a really tough year, a really devastating year. And we weren't sure if we were going to be able to keep going forward or not. And it was scary. Couldn't sleep much and a lot of stress. And so we this is what we did. We brought our banker in. We bought our financial coach or advisor at the time, Larry Parrott, used to work for M&P as well and was doing projections and stuff for us. And we brought in our marketing guy. And so we brought it all in, our whole team. We put all the numbers up on the wall and said, this is where we're at. This is what we think we can do. This is what we need to get through the problem. Can we do something? And our banker, Ron Boychuk at the time, was like, yeah, we can help you with this. You guys got a plan. You're working with a great team. Come in on Monday and we'll give you the the operating that you need to get you through, and we're behind you. And it was just like a huge weight was lifted off our shoulders. And yeah, there was still a lot of risk. We weren't sure we were going to make it, but at least we had a plan and we threw it all out there. Normally you'd be very nervous about being in that situation, especially when things are tough. But the reality is everybody wants to help you succeed.
Oh yeah. And I think the preparedness, right? You went to them. You showed them you had a plan.
Mm-hmm.
You literally didn't surprise them on March 31st when your covenant said you had to give them financials, and they opened them up and went, oh my. It's more or less, they're your partners. So if you and I were in business, I would expect you to tell me when something bad happens in our business, right? And that's how you have to approach it. You literally want your accountant and your banker to know ahead of time what's coming, because honestly, they don't want to foreclose. They don't want to shut down a farm. Nobody wants to be that bad guy. They want to help you. And that's the best part, is if you are prepared. And part of Maverick's mandate is the customers we deal with, that's what we do. We do projections. We do everything we can to work with the banks. And what you don't realize is, even not in bad times, but in good times, there's interest rates. There's other methods of banks that are willing to move if you show them that you have a sound business plan. And the problem in agriculture is that it's never been required. I farmed till 2013, never needed financial statements from my bank. It was a net worth statement, that's all they required. And I prepared it. Not until I started getting very deeper on the M&P side and then into Maverick that I realized that there is a significant benefit to being totally aware of your surroundings and totally prepared for what's coming.
Well, that's one of the things too. I think we've realized that the best time to ask for more is when you don't need it. Yeah. And our advisory board has been really good at coaching us on that, because you don't want to wait till you have that devastating year and you're behind the eight ball and now you're begging for help and make it through. When you're strong and stable and things are going good, that's where you want to have everything set up for those events that are going to come, because we know they're going to come.
And that's part of the risk management side, is that risk management doesn't have to be just what is the worst. It's how can we set the farm up in good years, from a leverage standpoint, from a banking standpoint, from every standpoint we can look at in terms of risk, which honestly on farms there's a lot. How can we set you up so that if a bad year does come, you're still sleeping? Because honestly there's minimal risk. And that's the goal, is cut down on risk on farming and in turn make a lot more profit.
So I mean, at the end of the day, believe it or not, if you work with this stuff and the right people, you can actually make financial and data decisions and risk management decisions kind of fun and interesting.
It is.
There's more to it than just growing the crop, eh?
For sure.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for being on the podcast with us. Hopefully, this inspires some people to look into these things a bit deeper, and there's a lot of opportunity out there. So
perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.